Welcome back to Herd to Harvest. If you're looking at a small piece of land, maybe a backyard, maybe a half acre, or even just a spacious garage or a corner of the barn, and you're thinking about turning that space into actual income, you have probably already run into the two names that come up over and over again: quail and rabbits. They are the twin titans of small-scale micro-livestock. They don't need pasture, they don't need a barn, they don't announce themselves to every neighbor within a mile radius, and they both have a reputation for turning a relatively small investment of money and time into a steady stream of protein and, ideally, profit. But the question that keeps coming back, and the question I get asked at nearly every homesteading event and in the comments of this channel, is simple. If you have limited space, limited time, and limited startup capital, and you want to make the most money this year in 2026, which one should you choose? Quail or rabbits? The truth is, they are not the same animal at all, and the path to making money with each one is completely different. Today, we're going to break it down, side by side, with real numbers, real timelines, and real talk about the markets you would be selling into. By the end, you will know exactly which animal fits your homestead and your wallet. Let's start with the first animal, quail. Specifically, we're talking about Coturnix quail, also called Japanese quail. These are the workhorse of the backyard quail world. When people talk about raising quail for profit, this is the bird they mean. Quail are tiny. A mature Coturnix quail fits in the palm of your hand. That small size is their greatest economic strength and, in some ways, their biggest marketing challenge. Because they are so small, the startup costs for quail are remarkably low. You don't need a big, expensive hutch sitting out in the yard taking up precious square footage. A wire quail cage, stacked 3 or 4 tiers high in a corner of the garage or on a screened porch, can house a productive breeding colony of 50 or 60 birds in a footprint that is smaller than a standard refrigerator. You can fit a profitable quail operation into a space that would be completely useless for almost any other livestock. The timeline is where quail truly shine. From the day you set a dozen eggs in a small tabletop incubator to the day you are harvesting those birds for meat is just 8 weeks. Let me say that again. 8 weeks. That is an almost unthinkably fast turnaround in the world of animal agriculture. And if you are raising them for eggs, the females begin laying at roughly the same age. 8 weeks from hatch, you have eggs rolling into the collection tray. If you start with fertile eggs, incubate your first batch, and grow out the best birds as breeders, you can go from zero to selling eggs and meat under 3 months. There is almost no other livestock enterprise that can generate cash flow that quickly. The feed conversion is also impressive. Quail are efficient at turning grain into protein. They need a high-protein game bird feed, usually around 24 to 28% protein. It's more expensive per bag than chicken feed, but they eat very little. A mature quail eats about 15 to 20 grams of feed per day. You can feed a whole colony of 50 hens with less than the cost of feeding a few large breed chickens. Now let's talk about the money. There are 2 primary products with quail: eggs and meat. Quail eggs are a novelty item in most markets, but they command a premium price. A dozen tiny speckled quail eggs can sell for anywhere from $5 to $8, sometimes more in high-end urban markets. The cost of production per dozen is quite low. A hen will lay almost an egg every day under good lighting conditions. If you have 30 laying hens, you are collecting roughly 2 dozen eggs per day, which is about 1.5 dozen after setting aside hatching stock. At $5 a dozen, with minimal feed costs, the egg side of the enterprise can be nicely profitable, especially if you sell directly to restaurants, farmers markets, or through social media. Quail meat is the other revenue stream. A dressed quail weighs only about 4 to 6 ounces, so you don't sell them by the bird for a family dinner. You sell them as a gourmet multi-bird experience. 4 to 6 quail on a plate, roasted or grilled, is a beautiful high-end meal that commands a price tag of $25 to $40 at a farm-to-table restaurant. If you can build a relationship with a local chef, you have a nearly insatiable demand. The birds process extremely fast. You can process a quail from live bird to table ready in under 2 minutes with a good pair of sharp scissors. Compare that to a chicken that takes 20 minutes to pluck and gut. The costs for quail processing are low because you do not need a plucker or scalder. You skin or pluck by hand. The processing restrictions that limit chicken sales, like USDA inspection requirements for selling processed poultry across state lines, vary by state for quail, but they are often less restrictive because quail are classified differently under many state laws. You need to check your own regulations, but generally, selling quail meat is easier from a regulatory standpoint than selling chicken meat. Now, what about the downsides of quail? The first is that they are fragile. They are sensitive to cold drafts, they are prone to a behavior called scalping, where they peck each other's heads during mating if the ratios are off, and they are escape artists. A quail that gets out of its cage is nearly impossible to catch. They also require a very consistent, high-protein diet. You can't just toss them kitchen scraps and foraged greens the way you can with chickens. They need that game bird feed, and it is more expensive and less widely available than chicken layer pellets. The second downside is the market. Quail eggs and quail meat are not staples in the average American diet. You're selling a luxury, a curiosity, a delicacy. In a booming economy, that's wonderful. In a tight economy, the first thing people cut back on is $5 novelty eggs. Your customer base is smaller, and you will need to work harder to educate and to market. You cannot just put a sign at the end of the driveway that says eggs for sale and expect people to come flocking for quail eggs. You will need to build relationships with chefs, show up at markets consistently, and create a brand. The second animal is the rabbit. Specifically, we are talking about standard or commercial rabbit breeds like New Zealand whites, Californians, or the more compact Florida whites and silver foxes for those who want a dual-purpose heritage breed with a premium pelt. Rabbits are larger than quail, and everything about their enterprise reflects that. Their startup costs are higher. You cannot keep a productive rabbit colony in a shoe closet. They need individual or group cages that are larger, sturdier, and more expensive to build or buy. A 3-hole hanging cage setup with a good quality wire and resting mats will cost you several $100s just for the cages. You need nest boxes, you need feeders and waterers that can handle their larger appetite, and you need a plan for manure management because rabbits produce a significant amount of it. But if the startup is higher, so too is the unit value of what you sell. A single fryer rabbit butchered at 10 to 12 weeks dresses out at about 2.5 to 3 pounds of lean, white, high-protein, low-fat meat. That's a substantial amount of food. It can easily feed a family of 4. A dressed rabbit can sell for $10 to $15, sometimes $20 in a high-end direct-to-consumer market. That's a protein that can compete directly with chicken as a dinner centerpiece, not just a novelty garnish. The growth timeline is longer than quail, but still remarkably short for livestock standards. A doe can be bred at 5 to 6 months of age. Gestation is a reliable 31 days. The kits are born blind and naked, but they grow with shocking speed. They are weaned at 5 to 6 weeks, and by 10 to 12 weeks, they are ready for the butcher. From breeding to harvest, you're looking at about 14 to 15 weeks. Not as fast as quail, but still a rapid turnaround that allows you to produce multiple batches per year from a single doe. Feed conversion for rabbits is decent, not as perfect as the numbers would suggest on paper because rabbits are sensitive to heat and stress, but quite good. A doe with a litter eats a lot of high-quality hay and a pellet ration, but the pellet protein requirement is lower than quail. Around 16 to 18% protein is standard for rabbits. They also thrive on a diet supplemented heavily with fresh greens, garden weeds, twigs, and even root vegetables. If you're a gardener, a significant portion of your rabbit feed can come from your own land. Comfrey, clover, kale, carrot tops, dandelion greens, all of these are free feed for rabbits. That can dramatically improve your profit margin. The revenue streams for rabbits are more diverse than quail. First, there's the meat. A steady supply of fryers sold directly to consumers or through a market is the foundation. Second, there's the manure. Rabbit manure is cold, meaning it does not need to be composted before being applied to garden beds. It's a perfectly balanced, pelleted organic fertilizer that gardeners will pay good money for. A single doe with her litters can produce a surprising amount of manure, and selling bagged rabbit manure to home gardeners can offset your entire feed cost.
Third are the pelts. This is a smaller market, but a real one. Hides from heritage breeds like silver fox or Rex can be tanned and sold to crafters and fiber artists. Fourth, there are breeding stock sales. If you build a reputation for healthy, productive bloodlines, you can sell young breeding trios to other homesteaders looking to start their own meat rabbit program. A proven breeding trio can sell for $100 to $200 depending on the breed and your location.
The processing timeline for rabbits is longer than quail. It takes longer to dispatch, skin, gut, and cool a rabbit than it does a quail. You are dealing with a larger animal, and the butchering process requires a certain level of skill and confidence. You can get fast with practice, but it will never be as quick as scissoring a quail. Now, let's talk about the market for rabbit in 2026. Rabbit meat occupies an interesting space. It is not a mainstream American protein like chicken or beef. Many people have a cultural aversion to eating rabbit, associating it with a beloved childhood pet or with the Easter Bunny. That is a real barrier. But among the people who do eat rabbit, the demand is strong and growing. Rabbit is lean, it is sustainable, it is easy to raise in small spaces, and it is very popular in many immigrant communities who grew up eating rabbit as a staple meat. It is also growing in popularity among health-conscious consumers looking for low-fat, high-protein alternatives to industrial chicken. The locavore movement has been very good to rabbit producers, because a locally raised, pastured, or humanely kept rabbit is a world apart from the frozen, imported rabbit you sometimes see in big grocery stores. If you are willing to educate your customers and build relationships, the rabbit market is steady and loyal. Now, let's put these two animals side by side in the categories that matter most when you are trying to make a profit in 2026. First, space and infrastructure. Quail require less square footage per dollar of potential revenue. You can stack them vertically. They are the undisputed champions of the ultra-small footprint. If you are operating out of a garage or a tiny backyard, quail are going to be more manageable. Second, startup speed and cash flow. Quail win here hands down. You can have eggs and meat for sale in 8 to 10 weeks from the moment you plug in the incubator. Rabbits have a longer ramp-up period. You need to grow out your breeding stock, breed them, wait through gestation, grow out the kits. Your first rabbit check will arrive months after your first quail check. Third, per unit value and market breadth. Rabbits win this one. A 3-pound rabbit at $15 is a much easier sale than 4 tiny quail at $30. The rabbit is a recognizable dinner. The quail is an adventurous appetizer. In a cautious economy, the dependable dinner sells better than the luxury experience. Rabbit also has the manure and the pelts and the breeding stock as secondary revenue streams that add real dollars to the bottom line. Fourth, feed costs and self-sufficiency. Rabbits have a clear advantage if you're a gardener. They can eat a high percentage of their diet as fresh greens and hay grown on your own land. Quail are dependent on a purchased high-protein feed. In a year like 2026, with supply chains still occasionally unpredictable and grain prices volatile, being able to grow a chunk of your own feed is a significant financial buffer. Fifth, processing time and effort. Quail are faster to process per bird, but you have to process many more of them to make the same amount of money. A few dozen quail for a restaurant order will take you an hour or two of focused work. Rabbits take longer per animal, but each animal is worth more. The physical effort is different. Quail processing is repetitive, small movements with scissors. Rabbit processing is more physically demanding, but results in a product that feels more substantial. Sixth, regulatory environment. This varies wildly by location, but in general, selling dressed quail is legally simpler in many states because they fall under an exemption. Rabbits processed on your farm and sold directly to the end consumer are also often exempt from USDA inspection if you are below a certain volume threshold. Check your own state's Department of Agriculture website before you start. Do not rely on what someone on the internet tells you about your local laws.
So, which one actually makes more money? Be honest, slightly unsatisfying answer is that it depends on your market and your personal strengths as a producer. But there are clear patterns we can pull from the data. If you live in an urban area with a thriving foodie scene, you are within driving distance of high-end restaurants, and you are good at networking and building chef relationships, Quail can be extraordinarily profitable on a per square foot basis. The margins are high, the turnover is lightning fast, and the demand from the restaurant industry is real. You can produce a lot of value in a very small space very quickly. If you live in a more rural area or a suburban area with a strong farmers market culture and a community that values whole foods, rabbits offer a steadier, more diversified income stream. The repeat customers who buy a rabbit every week for their family dinner are more reliable than a restaurant that might change its menu seasonally. The manure income alone can cover a significant portion of your feed bill, making the meat profit almost pure margin. One thing I want to be very clear about is that you should not start with both. I see so many new homesteaders get excited, read a bunch of books, and try to launch quail and rabbits and chickens and ducks all in their first spring. And what happens is they do none of it well. They end up burned out with sick animals and no profit. Pick one, learn it deeply, make it profitable. Then, if you want to add the other, you will have the skills, the infrastructure, and the customer base to make it work. For most beginners, I tend to lean toward quail as the absolute best entry point into small livestock for profit. The barrier to entry is so low. You can start with a $100 incubator and a batch of fertile eggs for $20. If you fail, you have not lost much. If you succeed, you can scale fast. Rabbits are a slightly bigger commitment, a slightly bigger learning curve, and they require a slightly stronger stomach for the butchering process because they are mammals and the dispatch is more emotionally significant for many people. But they also produce a product that is easier to sell to a wider audience, and they offer those wonderful secondary revenue streams. Ultimately, the animal that makes you the most money is the one you actually enjoy caring for and marketing. If you dread feeding time, if you hate processing, if you're embarrassed to talk about your product at the farmer's market, you will not be successful no matter how good the numbers look on a spreadsheet. But if you find an animal that fascinates you, that you love to show up for, that you're proud to present to your customers, you will find a way to make it profitable. So, where do you start? Start by researching your local market. Go to your nearest farmer's market this weekend. Look around. Is there anyone selling rabbit meat? Is there anyone selling quail eggs? If one niche is empty and the other is crowded, you have your answer. Talk to the manager of that market. Ask what products they are looking for, what they get requests for that they cannot fill. Go to a couple of local restaurants, not during the dinner rush, maybe on a Tuesday afternoon, and ask to speak to the chef for 2 minutes. Ask them what they struggle to source locally. That information is worth more than any amount of reading online. Then, once you have your market intelligence, pick your animal, build your system, and go. If you found this comparison helpful, hit that thumbs up so other small-scale producers can find it. And if you're not subscribed to Herd to Harvest yet, come join our community of practical, no-nonsense homesteaders who are building profitable, sustainable lives from the land. I'll see you in the next one.